I'm here. I'm going to do something I haven't done before. I'm not going to lie. It is my great terror. If there's anything that scares me, if there's anything that afflicts me, both spiritually and also terrestrially, it is this. I've been to Central America, and one of the things I noticed when I first went there is that there is a very common layout in many of the old Spanish colonial cities. There's something felt ominous. Every time I see it, I'm very, very conscientious of the directions, the placement, the consistencies, and from the north to the south of the country. The specific cities and the central square of particular concern are laid out similarly. They have major entities in the various directions that are consistent from city to city. And while these are cities I've been to that were identified as Christians, specifically in a tradition associated with that which branched off from the Catholic Church, if not the Roman Catholic Church itself, I've also seen pictures of cities elsewhere, including cities that at some point were either colonized or developed as Islamic cities that have a similar kind of construction. This concept of a central square with the four quarters, the four directions of the city being marked by some very prominent kind of architectural phenomena. And I understood it to myself as if it was almost as if it was an invocation, or rather, an acknowledgement of what had been placed as the authority for that direction. In some sort of tribal societies, the four directions have a great power. It's important to acknowledge them for what they represent, but in this particular kind of colonization, it is as if to say that by virtue of the placement of the specific structure, that there has been imposed upon it a definition of what the authority is in that direction. So anything else you could possibly seek in that direction must first be identified through your acknowledgement of the authority that has been determined based upon the actual structure of the architecture in that direction. Now, when I first encountered this, when I first stepped into a city of this, I noticed it immediately. It was as if my spirit understood it. And as I said, it was ominous. It wasn't evil, but it was definitely an attempt to say, acknowledge. But then I said to myself, well, something about this doesn't seem quite right. There's something older here. You put something else on top of something older, and it's not accurate. I had no idea what that meant. It was intuitive, but it was also spiritual. I went from city to city to city. And then once I returned to the United States, I noticed it in certain cities in the United States as well. Sometimes it's on a more smaller level. Sometimes it's on a greater level. Now, at some point, once I began my certain studies, particularly of what was identified as Apocrypha from the canonical Christian Gospels and what is known as the New Testament of particular elements of the Christian Church, I came across the revelation of Paul. And I said to myself, my goodness, this is my terror. Because I recognized it then as terror. It was as if there was a sort of surreal, almost cruel, supremacist joke being played on the primitive converts. Now, if that seems to be a bit severe, you need to read what it says. If I recall correctly, it recounts the apostle being accompanied by an angel through a city. It was laid out in four directions, and each direction has a symbolic inference. And there is great affliction. And the apostle says to the angel, what can I do? And the angel says, there's nothing you can do. God has already condemned the city. You are here to watch, and I am here to guide you. And he calls out and he calls out, "What can I do? What can I do?" There's nothing you can do. They have already committed to the sin. This is the manifestation. This is the instantiation of their sinful inclinations. They've turned their back on God. They've engaged in these defilements. God has already condemned the city. You are here to bear witness. And I said to myself at some point later, wait a second. Why would you be told you're not allowed to know? You're not allowed to know this revelation. It's considered to be heretical. Yet somebody must know. Did the Spanish know? When the Spanish started colonizing the cities of the indigenous populations, when they came to the Americas, did they intentionally encode and create a city based upon an apocalyptic, apocryphal revelation of an apostle, almost as if to condemn them to some form of sinfulness, especially if they insisted on maintaining the vestiges of a memory of a time before they were colonized? Well, we're not going to tell you what the affliction is, but you do what we tell you to do, and there might be some relief. What can I do? What can I do? Well, it's different if you're the apostle and the angel is with you to support you while you bear witness, to explain it to you. Or what if they just say, recite these words? Come here when we call. Pay us this tribute. Here's a rule, here's a rule, here's a rule, here's a rule. By the way, we expect you to come when the bell sounds. Every week. They've condemned the city already by its very construction, but they're not going to tell you that. How do you find out? What do you do when you find out? Is the angel showing you the greatness of these men that are upon their fall? Those who know what the sacred directions were and what they did to sanctify them on a particular level in order to give themselves a false power. Now, I might be wrong, but God has not seen fit thus far to allow me to live outside of a city. Over and over and over again, I am transported from one city to another, to another, to another, to another. I'm not supposed to be allowed to own my own house in my own name, but I see the same afflictions over and over and over again. I'm in Texas now. It's not so dissimilar in Texas, you know. In some ways, it's more subtle, but it's the same. Who knows? Why wouldn't they tell us? If it had been determined that they understood that God had vested them with the authority to redetermine the sanctification of the sacred directions, why would they not let you know what their authority was? Why would they keep this hidden? Why would they engage some secret order and then refuse to let you know the secret? And yet expect that they are entitled to bind you to it. Cities burn. That's the story. Who decides to put themselves within the city? Who decides to put themselves in the charge of the city or in charge of the city? Do you not think that if the city is meant to burn, then you should burn with it if you refuse to prepare people and fortify them in order to be able to honor the directions so that the city is safe? Because I think you should. If your city is supposed to burn for some sin, and you have refused to provide your people with what they need to be protected from that sin, you deserve to burn with that city. Now, I don't want to be in Dallas. I haven't wanted to be in Dallas for a while. But that does not seem to matter. Is this God's calling? Well, I don't acknowledge the men or women have taken it upon themselves to determine where my space is bounded and how I can personally be defiled in the course of watching them defile their own cities over and over again. And yet God has seen fit not to let me leave. You understand?